Hello, today we will be talking about cultural humility. What is it? Why is it so important, especially for those of us that are working in a legal clinic setting? These are some of the things we'll be reviewing today, some definitions on major terms that are discussed when talking about culture, humility, competence, awareness. Why does this matter? How can you apply this today? And some final thoughts. Around the discussion of cultural humility, there have been different terms that have been used when discussing this topic. Currently, the most appropriate terminology is cultural humility. However, there are some other aspects such as cultural competence, cultural awareness, and cultural sensitivity that are key terms to keep in mind as we move through this presentation. So the focus, of course, is cultural humility. This is the main definition that has been established to capture this idea. It involves an ongoing process of self-exploration and self-critique, combined with a willingness to learn from others. It means entering a relationship with another person with the intention of honoring their beliefs, customs, and values. So this definition gives you a great understanding of cultural humility as a learning experience. So it's an ongoing process. This is different from what used to be used, which is cultural competence used to be the primary term used in the discussion. Now we use cultural humility because competence, at least full competence of another's culture, is an impossible task. So cultural humility still encourages developing that competence, developing the knowledge base and the skills and the learning, while also acknowledging that you don't know everything. You're starting from a place of not knowing and going from there. It's a kind of teamwork process. You're working with somebody else to learn who they are, how you can assist them, and how their culture has shaped who they are today, and how is that different from who you are and how you're addressing the situation. So, in order to be culturally humble, you have to have the foundational value of cultural awareness, which is defined as being cognizant, observant, and conscious of similarities and differences among and between cultural groups. So, they say this is the first and foundational element to cultural humility because without it, it's virtually impossible to acquire the appropriate attitudes, skills, and knowledge which are essential to gaining some cultural competence and building up that cultural humility. So, awareness of cultural differences and their impact on behavior is really the beginning of intercultural effectiveness. So, cultural self awareness can include recognizing your own cultural influences upon your values, your beliefs, your judgments, as well as the influences derived from your professional work culture. And having cultural awareness can really help you understand how your own perceptions have been shaped and how the perceptions of your clients have been shaped. So, looking at a situation and understanding there are cultural differences here. We're not going to see everything eye to eye. We're not going to understand everything in the same way. Starting from that level of awareness can really facilitate the learning process towards cultural humility. So you want to be conscious of your culture, your views, your values, also the organizational culture of the location or the setting that you're working in, and then also being exposed to the cultures of others, having reflection and self observation. All these things really come together to provide you with some cultural awareness and again work towards that cultural humility. So, little by little, you'll change over time and you'll learn more and have a firmer grasp of what are the needs of my client, how has that need been shaped by who they are, how can I best facilitate or help address that need in a way that's respectful and understanding. So there is some clarification needed for the distinction between competence and humility, because competence is defined as what is read on the screen, the integration and transformation of knowledge about individuals and groups of people into specific standards, policies, practices, etc. Cultural competence is kind of like the ideal. It's the top of the mountain. It's what we strive to reach, but for the most part, it's kind of an impossible goal to be fully culturally competent on somebody else because you're not just talking about their culture, their ethnicity, their specific language, their behavior. So, cultural competence is kind of like a mission impossible. Cultural humility can really help to bridge that gap. This diagram on the screen, or this pyramid, helps you to see how cultural competence is foundational, but cultural humility is really the goal here because cultural competence encourages that knowledge base, the learning, the self awareness, and the cultural humility piece is critical because it also helps you to recognize where are the underlying issues with the power differential. Am I ensuring that the system in which I'm working with is moving towards greater inclusivity, greater understanding, greater equality? And then also, how can the understanding of your own culture and others' culture work to help rectify maybe the inequalities that exist within that system? So, this is pretty handy to understand where these two concepts intersect and why cultural humility is the best approach. So, why is this relevant? Why do you care as a student attorney about being culturally humble? So, you want to think about the clients that you're likely going to be working with. They may not look like you, they may not sound like you, they may conceptualize ideas differently. So, their idea of what a lawyer does or what a courtroom looks like, all these different things that you may have a very set idea of what it's supposed to be, they may be slightly different for your client from what they've known, from what they've experienced. So, a client's culture, whether that means their neighborhood, their country of origin, their religious practices, their language, their family dynamics, all these things are shaping how they present themselves to the world, how they perceive the world, and how we're going to see them. So, being culturally aware, using humility to strive for more competence, can help you to build a stronger rapport with your client because you want to respect where they're coming from and bridge the possible gaps that are there. So, empowering your client, so that everyone involved in this journey is working together to reach that common goal at the end. It's really a necessary tool to developing a strong partnership with your client and working to rectify kind of the power imbalance. And what do I mean when I say power imbalance? When you look at in the clinics, being aware and being humble about cultural differences is critical, especially in the pro bono setting. And this is because, as you all are fairly aware of, your clients will likely be coming from low income communities, low income households. They will generally be from underserved or underprivileged communities. And it is possible that their present legal issue is due to issues possibly related to their background, their culture, um, in those other systems where things are still not quite equitable. So you want to be very aware of this because there's already that power dynamic, and you don't want to exacerbate that by being insensitive, by being unaware, by not striving your best to approach the situation with understanding that you don't know exactly what the experience of your client is, but having a learning approach that you want to learn more, you want to understand what it is that they're coming from, what is their perception of the issue, and working hand in hand to reach your common legal goal. So, then how can we apply what we've learned so far in concrete ways? How can you be more attentive and aware to the different cultural cues, the differences that could facilitate or impede the rapport if you're not careful, especially from those that are most culturally diverse from you? These are some ideas, some very basic tips. You want to go into the rapport, not making any assumptions. Be aware of your bias, where you've come from, what your experience has been, how that experience might be significantly different from your clients, and how that has shaped your opinions, your ideas, your approach to a certain case, to a certain situation. Be patient with yourself and with your client. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't rush to say, yes, I understand, I completely agree. Be careful, be patient, take the time to really understand where they're coming from. Adapt, and I know that I do not know viewpoints. So be very aware. I don't know everything about this client. I don't know what their life experience is. I'm willing to learn. I want to help them as best as I can. Be respectful, of course, always. And don't be afraid to ask questions. That doesn't mean inundate your client with innumerable questions about their culture. That just means if there's something that they've said, that they've mentioned, a certain behavior that keeps coming up that you're not quite familiar with, or an interaction that you had that left you confused, just be humble enough to say, hey, I noticed this. I'm wondering if I'm perceiving this correctly. Could you steer me in the right direction? Or could you clarify your thoughts? And also be sure to allow your client to ask questions. We've talked about this so far in the case. Do you have any questions? Is there something that's not clear to you? So these are just some very concrete tips to help in your approaching the client cases with a sense of humility and sensitivity and awareness to how a client's culture will really impact the rapport, um, and how you build that rapport over the course of the semester. So that is all for today. These are some helpful links and videos to access more helpful information on cultural humility, how that's different from cultural competence, and really how you can help to facilitate a healthy partnership with your client, no matter the different culture, the different barriers that may come up. So I encourage you to really dig deeper and be aware as you start on this journey with your client cases. Thank you very much for your attention.